He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who is understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. In part 14, I propose that the mark of Cain is synonymous with the mark given by the beast rising out of the earth in Revelation 13:11. This is based on the understanding that the word mark in Genesis 4:15 is the same word rendered as signs in Genesis 1:14 regarding the two great lights of the sun and moon. As we know, the two great lights foreshadow the two covenants, where the light of the moon typifies the old covenant and law, and the light of the sun typifies the new covenant promise and grace. The purpose of the mark that God placed on Cain was to reserve vengeance to himself, agreeing with the fact that vengeance belongs to God and that he repays. God's vengeance is God's wrath, and it is God's law which brings it. Therefore, the mark on Cain foreshadows the law that would one day be given to Israel in written form while in the wilderness. It is in the wilderness of our own carnal mind where all of us receive the law, as it were, not so much in written form as in conscience. Strong's defines the word signs in Genesis 1:14 and mark in Genesis 4:15 as a signal, literal or figurative, as a flag, beacon, monument, omen, prodigy, evidence, etc. It's rendered token 14 times in the King James Old Testament. A token is a symbol or representation of something else. So the sign of the light of the moon corresponds to the mark on Cain, where both represent the Old Covenant law. Since the covenants came from God to man, then ownership remains his, does it not? This is a critical point to remember regarding both covenants. In Revelation 13:17, the word mark is defined as a scratch or etching, that is, stamp as a badge of servitude. In other words, those with the mark are in service to something higher than themselves. Since God has ownership, then those with the mark are ultimately subject to him. For this reason, we're told that the beast causes all to receive a mark. In other words, the beast doesn't give it, but rather influences all to receive it from another source. Who marked Cain? It was God. At this point, we must ask ourselves, who is this beast that rises out of the earth? Other passages in Revelation actually answer this question for us. Please consider. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These two were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. When we compare the context of this passage with Revelation 13:11 through 18, we find that the beast rising out of the earth symbolizes the false prophet. No, not an individual, but a collective body of any sort that handles the law of God out of pride in the same way as the Pharisees did in Jesus' time. Jesus called this collective force a synagogue of Satan in Revelation 2:9 and 3:9. Here are two more references to the false prophet. Note where I have inserted the corresponding passages. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. The devil, who deceived them, was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. Just as the beast rising out of the sea is a collective entity, so too is the beast rising out of the earth. Our word beast is the same both times, meaning a small but dangerous animal. No doubt about it, when we walk in the inordinate love of the self, We are the most dangerous animal on the planet. Need proof? Just consider the recent presidential campaign and the wars taking place in Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East. So what is meant by the word beast? It refers to man in his carnal nature and the mind of the flesh. This is why the beast of the sea is symbolized as a leopard, bear, and lion. These animals know no other realm than that of the flesh or natural realm. This is what makes the false prophet false. For the natural man does not receive the things of the Spirit of God, while the carnal man has enmity against God and is not subject to the law of God, nor indeed can be. Despite our resistance to God's law, we remain under it, for again, ownership is God's. This is God's love in action. For the spiritual nature of the law cannot be reckoned without the law itself. Remember, everyone is in a transition from one to the other. God's law is necessary for our carnal essence until it is purged by His Spirit, and we walk in His love and grace. This is our wilderness journey. The mark is a sign, and the sign is an indication of ownership. This ownership is emphasized in the following. Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves slaves to obey, you are that one's slaves whom you obey, whether of sin leading to death, or of obedience leading to righteousness? Friend, do you see the two covenants in this passage? Do you realize that since both came from our Maker, then He retains ownership of both, whether sin leading to death or obedience leading to righteousness? This being the case, consider the following. When the Son of Man comes in His glory and all the holy angels with Him, then He will sit on the throne of His glory. All the nations will be gathered before Him, and He will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And He will set the sheep on His right hand, but the goats on the left. Babylon sits on many waters, indicative of the world at large, regardless of culture. The false prophet causes all to receive the mark, describing all as both small and great, rich and poor, and free and slave. Small, rich, and free describes those who walk in the love and grace of the new covenant, while great, poor, and slave describes those still under the law. But God owns both. This is why we see the Lord sitting on the throne of His glory and all nations gathered before Him. This is a present reality, for Christ ascended to the throne after His baptism by John and has been there ever since. Note that those who fail to walk in love and grace are not consigned to eternal torment. Rather, they simply remain at the left hand of God. Such is His unrelenting love. All nations? Yes, for the message of the cross transcends all religious boundaries, and the moral essence of God's law applies to all mankind. As I've said before, Christianity does not have a monopoly on God's process. Incidentally, Strong's defines sin as to miss the mark, as in receiving the law and failing to keep it. Yes, this is why the Spirit of truth is necessary to our transition. Apart from Him, we can do nothing. I will end this study at this point, but there is still more to be considered regarding the mark, so we will take this up in the next video. God bless each of you, and thank you for being a part of Grain of Wheat Publishing.